Well, good evening. This is Pastor Dan at Crossroads Baptist Church. Today is November 15th, and this is our evening service, and we are finishing up our study on world religions and major cults this evening. So this will probably be a pretty brief video, but if you know me, you probably shouldn't hold your breath. And so let me just give us some introduction here. We're going to talk about several things here this evening as a way to sum up what we have looked at over the course of these past weeks and months, where we've looked at different belief systems that are either a false religion or a cult, some type of errant version of Christianity. And the first thing we're going to look at is their errant authority. And each of the belief systems that we've looked at in this study, there has been something wrong with their authority system. Secondly, we're going to see that they all have an unbiblical view of Jesus. Some to a lesser extent, others it's so blatantly clear that the Jesus that they talk about is not the biblical Jesus, that there's just no question anybody can see it. But they all have an unbiblical Jesus. And finally, third, we're going to talk about the absolute control that the group, the society, the church, the religion has over its members. So in each of the systems that we have looked at in this study, they have an errant system of authority, they have an unbiblical view of Jesus, and they exercise absolute control over their members. So first, let's look at the errant authority. We have seen that all false religions and cults have their own system of authority. Some have their own scriptures, such as Islam has the Quran, Hinduism has the Vedas. Others use the Bible in some way, but they use it in conjunction with their other equally authoritative works, such as Mormonism and the Book of Mormon. They have an equal authority, is what they would say. So we have seen this in our study, but all these things are errors. So let's begin first with Catholicism. In Catholicism, authority is ultimately vested in the church itself. The church leaders tell its members what to believe, what the correct interpretation of the Bible is. And so, yes, while they use the Bible, and probably should mention they add some things to the Bible, they add some books to the Bible, but they use the Bible, but the interpretation that you have to follow if you want to be a faithful Catholic is the interpretation that the church gives you. And where does that interpretation come from? It comes from a group of church leaders. Also, we clearly see in Catholicism that when the Pope is exercising his official teaching position as the leader of the church, he is uttering infallible proclamations. That's what the Catholic Church would say, that in his teaching position he can utter infallible. That means that's true. It's not false proclamations, and so the authority is really vested in that case in the Pope. So Catholicism has an errant authority. Islam, it vests its authority in the Quran and thus the Prophet Muhammad, because that's where the Quran comes from. And so while Islam accepts some things from the Bible, it explicitly contradicts other statements in the Bible. And so while it accepts some things in the Old Testament, some things in the New Testament, it does not believe what the New Testament says about Jesus as far as his deity goes. So for the Muslim, the Quran is the absolute authority. And probably if we would just go a little bit deeper than that, we would find that it's the Arabic form of the Quran that is the absolute authority, as it's interpreted by its recognized religious leaders. And so that's Islam. Then next is Hinduism, and Hinduism vests its authority in the Vedas. The Vedas, their teachings are where they find their authority, and there are many Vedas. And so the Hindus have something of a buffet before them in choosing who they are going to follow and who their authority is going to be. But of course, when you have these multiple Vedas, it brings up the question of who's right, who's wrong, which ones do we follow? And so Hinduism vests its authority in the Vedas. And Mormonism vests its authority in the Book of Mormon and the leaders of the Mormon Church and some of the other writings that we've talked about when we looked at them. And while they certainly have an appreciation of the Bible, the Mormon Church turns to the Book of Mormon for its authority. If they want something authoritative, they're going to go to the Book of Mormon. And furthermore, the proper interpretation of the Book of Mormon must come from the leaders of the Mormon Church. If you're a Joe Average Mormon, you're not allowed to interpret the Book of Mormon on your own. You have to follow the interpretation that comes down from the leaders of the church. And so, in fact, not only is the Book of Mormon their authority, but also the leaders of the Mormon Church become their authority. And finally, we'll take a look at Jehovah's Witnesses. And, of course, they claim to follow the Bible, but really they find their authority in the leaders of their society. They've even come up with their own translation of the Bible, the New World Translation. And this translation, which is their authority, is filled with obvious adjustments to fit their own particular doctrines. And so while the Jehovah's Witnesses will say, we believe the Bible to be true, it's only true so long as it matches their particular doctrine. If there's any question about something they believe, they go directly to the leaders of the society. And so in each of these 5 examples here, we find that there are multiple sources of authority in their belief system. Some is multiple scriptures, such as in Hinduism. Some it's a multiplication of different aspects of authority, such as Catholicism, where you have tradition, you have the church, and then you have things like the church council. I can't think of the technical name, but like the College of Cardinals, or who makes doctrinal decisions for the church, but it's vested in multiple different things. And we have the same thing in Mormonism and in the Jehovah's Witnesses. In Christianity, there's only one authority. That's the Bible, the 66 books of the Old and New Testament. And even though there might be disagreements with certain interpretations, we all agree that the Bible is the place to go for the truth. The Bible has the truth. And so when we think about this, Christianity, the only authority is the Bible. The pastor's not the authority. The Bible's the authority. The church isn't the authority. The Bible is the authority. And so all these other religions and cults can be proven to have multiple authorities and even contradict themselves in their own authoritative proclamations. They have errant authority. The next thing I want us to see is how these different belief systems view Jesus, and I want us to see that they all, to one extent or another, have an unbiblical view of Jesus. And so first, let's start with Catholicism. And you might think to yourself, now, how in the world can Catholics have a false view of Jesus or an unbiblical view of Jesus? Don't they believe in the same Jesus as we do? They certainly accept the Gospels the same way that we do. And to that, I would say, while Catholicism uses the Bible as their holy book, and they have an orthodox view of Jesus on the surface, there are certain other beliefs that they hold that are false beliefs, and these beliefs then, in some way, compromise the person and the work of Jesus Christ. For example, Mary being the co-redemptrix, the co-redeemer with Christ. Well, how can that be? It can't be. There's only one Redeemer, and it is Jesus Christ. And to insert Mary into that compromises the person and work of Jesus Christ. So even in Catholicism, which we generally view as saying having a orthodox view of Jesus Christ, there's other doctrines that they do have that do creep in, and they do compromise who Jesus is and turn him into an unbiblical Jesus. Next is Islam, and of course Islam believes that Jesus was only a great man and a great teacher. He was a prophet. but he wasn't a prophet at the same level as Muhammad. Furthermore, Islam ignores not only the biblical evidence about Jesus, the fact that the Bible tells us that Jesus is God, and that he died on the cross and was raised again on the third day. Not only does the Bible tells us, but this, and the Muslims ignore that, but they also ignore the extra biblical evidence about who Jesus is. So this isn't biblical evidence, it's evidence from history, and they just ignore that. And so because of that, they end up with an unbiblical view of Jesus. And then there's Hinduism. Often, Hinduism, particularly Hindus themselves, don't even recognize who Jesus is. They don't even know the most basic information about Jesus. He's not even on their radar screen. And so whatever their view of Jesus is, it comes up to be an errant view because of their neglect of the information about him. And so they certainly have an unbiblical view of who Jesus is. And then there's Mormonism. Mormons certainly believe in the existence of Jesus, but they deny his deity. They intentionally misrepresent what the Bible says about Jesus or simply ignore it. And so the Jesus of Mormonism is not the biblical Jesus. They have an unbiblical Jesus. And then there's the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are much like the Mormons in that they believe in the existence of the historical person of Jesus, but they also deny his deity. And because of this, the Jesus of Jehovah's Witnesses is a unbiblical Jesus. It's a false Jesus. We might even say he's anti-Jesus or anti-Christ. In each of these belief systems that we have just looked at, we have found something lacking in their view of Jesus. Sometimes it's very small and almost insignificant, like Catholicism, while at other times it's clear and that a belief system's view of Jesus is totally unbiblical. And here's the thing, without the correct view of Jesus, without the biblical view of Jesus, you cannot have Christianity. Christianity is really defined by who Jesus is. Now let's shift to our third area of consideration, absolute control. And so as we look at these 5 different belief systems, we see that the leadership of each of these systems exercises an absolute control over its members. In Catholicism, in the Catholic Church, the members have to follow what the church says. And this is the point. They have to follow. Let me kind of reword what I was thinking here. They have to follow what the church says, all the way to the point that if the person doesn't do what the church says, they can be excommunicated, or if they violate certain teachings, they're going to go to hell. And what I want us to see here is that what the absolute control that's exercised in the Catholic Church is fallible men trying to tell other fallible men what to do. And they're trying to keep the people under control. And so they exercise this absolute control over them. In Islam, the control of Islam over its adherents functions in much the same way that it does in Catholicism. It comes down to those recognized as authorities making binding, authoritative pronouncements that must be followed without question. So a leader in the Islamic gathering can make a proclamation that must be followed. Or the leaders of Islam come up with an interpretation of the Quran that must be followed. And then there's Hinduism. The control of Hinduism is seen in their teaching to disengage the mind and simply follow what is written and propagated by its leaders in the Vedas. When it comes to answering the difficult questions of their faith, they're simply just told, don't worry about it, just believe. Just believe. Just accept what you have been told. Don't think critically about it. That's not what we do. We don't think critically. Just accept it. Don't ask too many questions and don't think too hard. And because of this, they're disarming the minds of their followers, and thus they have control over them. In the Mormon, I hate to say the Mormon church, but Mormonism, complete control is exercised by telling its members what to believe. So Mormons also aren't allowed to question their faith. They can't ask questions, well, why do we believe this? Why do we believe that? No, they're just told, believe. You must believe this in order to be a good Mormon. And if you're not a good Mormon, you're not going to be saved. Jehovah's Witnesses is much the same way as the Mormons. You have to believe what the Watchtower Society tells you to believe, and they tell you what to believe by their publications. And I want us to understand that the absolute control of these systems over their members betrays a weakness inherent to all of them. And that is, they cannot stand up to criticism. In any one of these, let's see, I didn't put the Jehovah's Witnesses on. In any one of these 5 systems that we see here, when these things, when their beliefs are brought into criticism and examination, they don't hold up. We see all sorts of contradictions in them. We see non-historical statements that are made as authoritative statements. So none of them hold up to criticism the way that true Christianity does, the way that the Bible does. You know, true Christianity has stood up to criticism almost its entire existence, and it continues to do so, and it will continue to welcome criticism, because when you have the truth, you have nothing to fear from criticism. And so one of the aspects of false religions and cults that we see is that its leaders must exercise absolute control over its members to keep its members in line with what they believe. Well, I hope you have found this entire series helpful and informative, but remember, the purpose of this series was not just to give information or enable us to pat ourselves on the back, but to better equip us to evangelize people of false faiths. One of the first things that you have to do in our effort to witness to people is you have to have a conversation. You have to have a common point about which to speak of. And by understanding these world religions and major cults, it gives you something, and it gives you some insight into the thinking of these people who desperately need the Lord. Will the Lord be with you and bless you as you continue to live for Him this week.